Hello, okay, so today I'm going to talk about how I made these abstract watercolour paintings. I used watercolour paints as well as aqua drops from Schminkle, but you don't need to use both of these, you can use one or the other. I also used a squeegee and a blending medium from Winsor and Newton, but you don't necessarily need to use the blending medium, you just need to experiment with the colours to see how well you can push them across the page. Now it's going to be clearer what I mean by this as I run through the demonstration, so let's get started. Okay, so I'm using Archer's cold pressed smooth grain paper and I found this works quite well. I did try a rougher paper and the paint just didn't pull across the page very well, so you can experiment beforehand with your papers. Okay, so this is my red aqua drop mixed with some of the blending medium, but you can just use water, and I'm using the squeegee to pull the paint down. Now it hasn't pulled down on the right hand side, so I'm going to put another line down that side and then I'm going to pull that paint across as well. So these little paintings are quite experimental, and I knew what colours I wanted to use and I had some ideas of some rough shapes, but you don't exactly know how they're going to turn out and you sort of need to work with the paint depending on how it goes on, and then each layer I think will give you an idea for the next one. So in this case, once this red had gone on, I decided to put a darker magenta shape on top, just to cover up that part of the bottom, and that worked really well. And actually where that white got left, that's made quite an interesting sort of shape there. And this paint's going on really well with the squeegee, and you will find that different paints go on in different ways and you'll get used to some of the paints working better than others. I did quite a lot of experiments before I did these little ones that I filmed, and I did find out which paints really didn't work and which ones did. I'm just very carefully removing a little speck of dirt there with my brush. Okay, so I did actually speed this up, and as it was drying I was thinking it's not completely dry, but I decided to put this Phythalo Turquoise underneath, and I know that this Phythalo Turquoise colour works really well with the squeegee, but it does have the blending medium in it, but to be honest it worked pretty well just with water. Okay, so I'm just pulling that up with my squeegee carefully and I'm just letting it touch the pink, and I'm sort of having a think as I do it. You know, to a certain extent when you do these paintings it's not exactly a kind of step by step, it's a case of responding to what's happening with the paints. And so my initial idea was to pull it up to that line, but actually I felt like that was just too much of a hard line, so at this point I then just pulled it up further so that it overlapped the pink. And then, you know, by a kind of happy coincidence, I got this effect where the middle part of the pink kind of bled more into the turquoise, and I just really liked that, and that's when I just decided that this painting was basically done. And you know, that's what I really love about watercolour and about using techniques like this, is that you do start out with a plan and then the paint does take on a little bit of life of its own, so you never know exactly how it's going to turn out. And there I just finished the edges off a little bit, but yeah, this one's done, so let's get on to the next one. Okay, so for this one I'm going to use that Phythalo Turquoise again, and I've mixed it with the blending medium. Again, like I said, you can just mix it with water, and I'm putting quite a kind of watery line there at the bottom. I'm making sure that there's quite a lot of paint because I really want that to get pulled up evenly if I can. And so I've got my squeegee there, and as you can see that's really working quite well. It's getting pulled up quite evenly, and you know, you probably couldn't achieve this with a brush. It would look differently. That's why I'm using the squeegee for these. And you know, it's a case of just knowing when to stop. So I'm just going to stop there with that one, and then I'm going to put another layer on top, and this time I'm going to use a cobalt blue. Now I did wait for that turquoise to dry, but you don't always have to wait for the paint under to dry. You can experiment and you'll get different effects. So that's my cobalt blue layer there. I'm putting that at the bottom. And I'm just going to do the same thing with the squeegee. I'm just going to pull it up, and I'm doing it quite slowly. And then once I got to the top, that paint stopped getting pulled up so much, so I was left with this little gap, and I decided just to get my paintbrush and fill that in. But I think with this painting it's very simple, but the thing that's nice about it is what's happening at the top, where the turquoise has got a slightly darker line, and then the cobalt blue sort of peters out a bit. It's very subtle, but it just makes this painting seem complete to me. So I'm going to say that this one's done, and I'm going to get on to the next one. Okay, so for this one I decided to start off with the Phythalo turquoise again, and a bit like the first one I did an arc at the top. And I just made a mistake there, which I'm just blotting out with some paper. So while the paint remains wet, you can change that shape. And I decided to do quite a thick band at the top. And I'm just putting extra paint on there because I really want to make sure that paint all pulls down. Okay, so I'm getting my squeegee there and I'm pulling the paint down. And it really does work really well, this colour. And actually, I'm just going to use the brush a little bit here, put more colour on, and then keep pulling it down, and that just goes on really nicely. And then you have this nice darker colour at the bottom. I'm just going to fill in the side there with my brush and pull up a bit and pull down. Okay, and then I really decided that this shape was basically finished, and I let it dry a little bit, but not completely, before putting the next layer on, which is a repeating shape, but in the red, which is the liquid watercolour. But you don't have to use liquid watercolour. This works just as fine with watercolour mixed with water or mixed with the blending medium. And I'm just pulling that colour down, and that's quite a watered down version, so the colour's going to be quite light, and at the bottom it's mixed with the Phythalo turquoise where it hasn't dried, so I'm not going to touch that too much. I'm just going to see what happens with it, and I'm just filling in that shape there with my brush. Okay, and at this point I decided to put another layer of cobalt blue this time at the top, and I did let it dry a bit, and then I put my arc again. I want these kind of repeating shapes, so I'm putting that at the top, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to pull that down quite slowly, and just to even it out I decided to pull down again with the squeegee, and that's it. I'm just going to leave this and see how it dries. Just removing some paint splatters there with a really wet brush. Okay, so it's dry now, and you can see how I've actually got these blooms, and a bloom happens when wet paint moves into drier paint, and you get this kind of line, which can look nice, but in this case I actually don't really like it. So I'm going to add some more layers on top of this painting, and not use this as a reason to think, oh no, this painting is ruined and it's no good, but to see what more I can do with this painting and hopefully turn it into something that I feel is successful. Okay, so I did actually think about it for quite a long time, but I decided to stay with the Phythalo turquoise after considering other colours, because I wanted to keep it simple. So what I'm going to do is just add another layer of the Phythalo turquoise on top of this bottom layer, and hopefully cover up some of that bloom, and also this will intensify that colour a bit. This is layering of the watercolour paint, or also known as glazing, and that can just, you know, really make those colours a bit brighter. And especially with this turquoise colour, it really is quite a bright colour. So as you can see, as I'm pulling that down, it is covering that bloom, so it doesn't look quite so pronounced. So hopefully all is not lost and this painting can be saved. Okay, and I'm happy with how this is looking, and I'm going to put another layer, even darker, below. And it's still drying, but there's some nice effects here where you can just see that pink coming through, and I like this line at the side, so I'm going to try and preserve that, and that's why I just want to put a line at the bottom. So I'm using Phythalo turquoise again, and the layer below is not completely dry, so it's just is merging a little bit into the layer below, and actually it's turned out to be really nice, I think. So I'm just going to leave it and see how it dries. Okay, so it might be useful for me to point out that while it was drying, I did tilt the paper because I wanted that dark colour to move to the bottom. I didn't want to risk getting another bloom, and also I thought it might look nice with a kind of darker line towards the bottom. So you can see that as I'm moving the paper, the paint is moving around, and I actually dried it tilted up. Okay, so these 3 paintings are done now, and I really hope you've enjoyed this demonstration, and if you did, then please hit like, and if you want to see similar videos in the future, then please subscribe to my channel. Okay, thank you, bye.